All right, welcome back. We're back in the VTM60. I'm going to try to finish this thing up, but also I'm glancing in here and remembering that there's a lot to do. So we'll see what we can do tonight and get through it. First of all, I'm going to hit this guy with some isopropyl alcohol, try to remove Samuel Jackson's stain from this amp. At least his mark from this. We're going to work on undoing the work that he did on this before, whoever this guy actually is. And then I'm going to move forward through the boards going this way. I'm going to replace the screen resistors here. Stock value, I believe, is 100 ohm on these. 470s are in there right now. I might... honestly don't know if I'd be able to tell the difference between 100 ohm or 470 or 1K or 1.5K. So I'm going to see what I got in stock and throw something in there. I'm going to touch up all these solder joints. I originally was thinking that I would pull this whole board and just do tube sockets, but I think I am going to just put it back in stock as is. This wire's come loose. It just goes right into this terminal here. Might replace this capacitor, but I'll test it first. And then coming back this way, I totally forgot that this cable that I think goes to... might go to power transformer or something, or one of the outputs. This is not good. I'm going to pull this, do a proper heat shrink, and I'll probably just pull this whole cable if I can. It looks like at some point, you know, this lighter blue wire, somebody did a okay job here. It's what they should have done over here, but this is unacceptable. We will then pull this board. There's some filter capacitance underneath here as well for the preamp stages. And then we'll get in this guy and might replace these two as well. And we'll pull this mod out of place, put this back to stock. I believe there should just be a resistor here. Whereas there's a switch with going between a resistor and a resistor and a capacitor here. But I'm just going to put this back to stock. Okay. That's the plan. We'll see what we can do. Hopefully power this thing up, get some sound out of it, and then, you know, tuning will come later. But, yeah, let's start with attacking this. I'm going to just scrub some isopropyl on there, let it sit, and see what happens. See if we can get the Sharpee off. So this might be a little bit sped up, but let's see what happens here. Looks like that is doing it, getting the ink off, but might take a little bit of time and a little bit of elbow grease. I'll get another paper towel here, though. Let's see. And things will be ramping up here. I'm going to try to get as far ahead on work as possible because I'm going to need about a week of downtime to actually get into the new shop and get that set up. So that'll be pretty cool. Hoping to do that within the next week or so. We've got the space, but are just kind of planning. It's going to be my amp work on one side, and then my girlfriend is going to be doing her tattoo work on the other side. So you can swing by, get your amp repaired, get a tattoo while you're waiting, or vice versa, which will be pretty fun. Yeah, and I'll give the tour of how that's going to be set up and show what kind of consideration goes into setting up a bench. It's going to be a fun opportunity to kind of reset how I do things and get set up properly. So happy to show as much or as little of that. Well, I mean, I guess you can just not watch it if you don't want to see that, but happy to show as much of that process as people want to see. I think I will build some custom boxes that I've intended to build for a long time in terms of throughput. So we'll have a box with my load box in it. So with my load resistors for hooking up to an amp that will then be switchable between going to just a silent load, some resistors versus going to an attenuator and then a speaker. And then we'll have a BNC connector on there for connecting directly to the oscilloscope across either one. And then in that same box, potentially have a switch between a guitar input versus a loop pedal or a signal generator. So I can send a sine wave through to test, but then can quickly swap it out for a pre-recorded loop on a loop pedal for testing amps, as well as switching over to just playing a guitar to test things out. And I'm going to build a couple attenuators to test out. I will need one for the new shop, because I'm going to keep my Preamp power station that I have been using lately for quieter testing. I'm going to leave that at home here with the studio. But I have some ideas about that. If anybody has any attenuators that they want to see, I'm probably going to try out a few different ones to see what I like the best. And we'll show that build process. You know, might take some time to get there. Got quite a few customer amps to get through this month, along with moving into the new shop, so it's going to take a little time, but that's part of the fun. Let's see here. Also been getting a lot of questions about the Sun Beta amplifiers, so definitely we'll be getting back into those as soon as I have an opportunity to. This will probably be the last one of my amps that I get to work on for a little while. Then we'll be moving through some more customer amps. Have another, let's see, an older twin reverb, a older deluxe reverb, both from the 70s. Yeah, early 70s for the twin, I believe. It's a non-master volume. And then 76 deluxe reverb is going to be coming up next after this. Got the Vox AC4 TV is coming back. One that I worked on before and should have done more. Also have another SVT CL coming in for a tune-up. A couple Ampeg V4s. I have two of my own to do, but then also a customer one came in the shop, so I might just shotgun all three of those. A Champ, I believe, is on the books. A vintage Champ. And something else. We were going to have a JC120, but TBD on that. Buddy who needed that work done couldn't get into his practice space by the time he needed the actual work done. So now it's kind of just delayed. But that's okay. There's always time for those in the future. And that's looking pretty good. Okay. So we'll let that sit for a second. And next up, let's go ahead and pull this board. To take a closer look. Now, these boards are kind of, if you don't remember the first video I did inspecting this amp, because it was quite a while ago, these are a nightmare to get out, man, because there's actually the nuts for these tube sockets are here, and it was a real pain in the butt to get to hold those nuts loose or tight to loosen these guys up, which is why I was like, I am never doing this again. Let's go ahead and pull that out. That's interesting. It looks like there's some electrical tape or something underneath there. But I don't know why. Yeah, so basically it was like, why do this? Why deal with this? Let's just put some through-hole style mounted to the chassis tube sockets all of this can just be coming off the tube sockets. I might just, yeah, I don't know. I think I'm going to leave this stock for now, though. Now that it's also interesting, that screen resistor is not soldered in. All right. Yeah, same with this guy. Is that even? I bet I could pull. Oh, I see what's going on. It's soldered to the other side. Oh, that was the other thing on this. That was the other reason I was thinking I should just replace this. This trace here, because these are soldered to the top. And whoever did this the last time applied too much heat. That trace is starting to lift. Man, okay. Well, at least to get this running, I am just going to go ahead and change these guys out for something that's going to be a little better, a little bit lighter weight. I think I have some resistors, some Vichets that'll be more lightweight, and then I can get those in place. I'm going to touch up these solder joints, going to get this board reinstalled. I think probably after I take this guy out, so I actually can get better access to this. But down the road, especially since I've got two of these I'm going to do, I might end up just modding both of them and figuring out a good way to do that. If I do, I will share that information with you, give a wiring layout and everything. But for now, just for the sake of getting this thing powered up and running, let's just stick with this board. I may regret that decision later on. We'll see. Okay, I'm going to track down resistors, though. Okay, here's what we're working with. I've got these guys, so if we can get that to focus. 1K, 5%, 5 watt. I believe these are made by Vichet. I will throw a link. I buy these from CE Disc, but you could get those from whatever their front-facing website is. I think it's Amplified Parts or Antique Supply or something like that. I'll throw a link on the Patreon on the free tier so you can see that. And get these if you want. And again, 100 ohm stock, 470s in there. I've waffled back and forth on whether that's going to make a difference. The higher the value, well, within reason. Marshalls have 1.5K. A lot of Fenders use 470s. 1K is a pretty reasonable value. Within reason, if you make this a higher value, you are going to preserve the life of the tube more. There are arguments, and again, this is the part I've gone back and forth on. I've figured, leave the stock values in there. Is it really going to make that much of a difference? I may do like a further, like actual scientifically based test of this to see whether it does make much of a difference, or just do the math on it and do some simulations. But I'm going to throw 1Ks in there. I doubt for myself personally that I could hear the difference in this. Some people I'm sure could. My ears are not that good. I had way too much fun when I was younger going to concerts and not wearing earplugs. So I'm not too worried about it for myself, but just one of those things I feel like needs to be said so that people can make their own decisions. Okay. I'm going to clean the solder out of this terminal so we can reattach that ground wire. Let's see, this might take a little bit of doing because there's probably still some wire in there. Let's see if we can get the pliers on that. Did get a pretty nasty cold. I was traveling the last couple of weeks. Got to go on a good vacation. Got real sick at the end. Got a couple people just cough right in my face on the subway in London, so got a little cold. So throat's a little hoarse. getting back on it, but I apologize for the delay. I meant to get this video out last week. And that might be good enough to get something in there. So add a little bit of solder. Actually, since this is going to stay in place, really could be doing this work with the board installed. I believe I've already tested all these components. I'll do that first. Yep, 48K there. What's this guy? 47.95. Then we just have two diodes here. And okay. And okay. Yeah, so let's see if we can pull these guys. We're going to want to be quick on these. We don't want to damage those traces any more than they've already been damaged. So now why use this green resistor instead of the white one? These are much heavier. These Icon ones are not bad in terms of being a resistor. Some of these white cement block style resistors don't dissipate the heat evenly across themselves, and because of that, they can desolder themselves if they're not installed properly. You usually want to install these with some space underneath, kind of like these are for airflow. But when you do that, there's a lot of stress on the legs because these are bigger and heavier and have skinnier legs than these green guys. So I like these better. These are a quality resistor. Okay. But yeah, we're going to be real quick with those connections, or as quick as we can, in an attempt to not cause any further trace lift-in. If you find you're having to spend more than a second or so on a terminal, it's usually the case that your soldering iron is not hot enough. Okay, that's about clean enough. However, you want to be careful with that. There are times when you could easily make your soldering iron too hot. Okay, I would say one disadvantage of these green resistors is they roll. All right. Got it back. Nope, and so does your solder sucker. Okay. Now, I just saw on Brad's Guitar Garage, he has a little crimp tool for the legs to put a little divot in there so that there is a mechanical connection for holding the weight. So I'm gonna try just doing that manually here, because that seems like a good idea. And did I make that too tall? Okay, so that's too much airflow. Yeah, I may have to get some of those pliers. That seems pretty slick. And Let's see. Just putting like a little divot like that. And again, because this is a personal amp, there's some room to experiment with sort of these sort of things. This was a customer amp that was getting sent out into the world. I potentially wasn't going to see it for years, ideally. Okay, let me not even mess with this. But in principle, that seems like a great idea. So I'm going to order some of those pliers. I can show you guys firsthand, or you can check out Brad's Guitar Garage, which I'm sure a lot of you do already, because it's one of the best in the game at this stuff, from what I've seen. Okay. All right. Nice and quick on these solder joints so we don't lift another trace. Wonderful. And again, because this and the other one coming up, the VTM60, are my own personal amps, we can use them as kind of like a proving ground for, oh, and since I have two of them, I would love to try and do some modifications and then sound tests to compare stock versus modded, because these are very cool amps. I've said this numerous times already, but I'm pretty sure, and this is just my opinion, so don't hate me for this, but pretty sure I'm going to end up selling my, oh, look at that, that trace is toast. Okay. And again, if this were a customer amp, I would be repairing that trace or offering a better solution here. But again, yeah, still on the fence. I feel like this whole board is just not in good shape. Let's see. Sam Jackson strikes again. If anybody knows the Sam Jackson that does amp repair, point him in my direction. I want to know what he was thinking. Or, you know, I want to be optimistic and hope that this was one of the first amps he worked on and he's gotten much better. But unfortunately, what happens with some of these amps, that people don't consider to be good or high value amps. This used to be the case for silver face Fenders. Okay, I think that's going to be secure enough. Now, I don't want to use the term cutting quarters here, but I am doing this with the intention of I am not going to be using this amp for shows until I fix this board in a better way. This repair is not up to my standards. These traces being lifted, this board needs to be rebuilt, either point to point with sockets which I think is what I will end up doing, or just make a new board. You can make a PCB that will match this up. It'll be totally good. Okay, so to finish that thought, unfortunately, amps like this, as well as things like silver-faced fenders, used to be considered not disposable, but really, you could get them so cheap. You used to be able to get silver-faced fenders for like a few $100, because if it wasn't the black panel, people thought they weren't worth anything. Same with these VTM60s. Up until not that long ago, like 2012, 2016-ish, you'd get these for like a couple $100. Same with 5150s. And that stuff really exploded over the last few years, but man, it was common for people to buy those amps and then just butcher them because they didn't consider them to be worth anything. It wasn't a real amp or a professional amp, despite the fact that like those first Soundgarden albums were recorded on VTM 120s. So I don't know what people were thinking there. Okay, so here's what we're going to do for this wire. I'm going to pre-tin this guy, which means we're going to, if we can, I'm kind of at an awkward angle here. Add some solder to that. We're going to add some fresh solder in here. Now I'm doing this because this is going to be awkward to hold all three things. Okay. And that should be good. Yeah, people used to just butcher those amps. They would get them, they would say they're not worth anything, they would hack them all apart. They would do crazy mods just to do something. I'm sure, as many of you know, it's not uncommon for people who are artists to want something that's different just for the sake of being different, not because it's better or worse. They just want different. And if something is cheaper, or if it is, I'm just going to touch up a few of these, or if it's easier to work on, which is kind of with those Fender amps, they're great amps because they're so easy to work on, which also makes them great amps to learn how to work on amps. But it also makes it so people may know just enough to be dangerous, can get in there and mess them up. All right, that's all we're going to do for this board. So I'm going to get this reattached. Let me do that off camera because I'm going to have to get at some really awkward angles to get this reinstalled if I'm remembering correctly from how it came apart. So we'll be back and then take this board out. Just to finish with that thought though, it's the reason you see these kind of amps being in bad condition. One of my goals is to get these kind of things back to stock, reliable, fix those kind of issues, get them back out there playing music to people that are going to love these amps. I'm probably going to keep one, if not both, of my VTM60s. But, that's the reason I like working on a lot of the solid-state stuff that other people don't want to touch, or, a lot of the things that might end up in a landfill. I'm trying to keep that stuff out, keep it making art, keep it out there in the world making music to the people that are going to love it. I'm a big fan of the principle of if you don't like the amp that you have, it's probably not worth modding unless you specifically know what kind of mod you want for a sound that you're going for. there is a much higher chance that that amp that you don't like, someone else is going to love. You can sell it, take that money, get the amp you're going to love. So that's my principle. Doesn't have to be yours, but just how I approach things. Okay, let's get this board in place. Move on. Okay, so we've got the board out. This board, the preamp board, preamp board is here, controls board. I quickly realized I'm not going to be able to get this back in very easily. So I've got a second idea for a solution. The problem is that these bolts for holding the circuit board in on the other side go to the tube retainers. Then they come through to free spinning nuts on the back of these tube sockets, which when this is installed, you have very little clearance to get in there, to get underneath. If you had some long curved pliers, it wouldn't be much of a problem necessarily, or a very short, wrench to hold those in place at the right size, which I do not have access to either in the moment. Because this is my amp, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw a little super glue. I've got these nuts mounted. Now this is I wouldn't recommend doing this to a customer amp or anything like that. But because this is my own and I'm probably going to trash this board eventually, I have the nuts secured in place as they're going to go. I'm going to put a couple drops of super glue on the back of the nuts just to hold them in place for enough time to screw these things back down once it's secured to the actual board here, or to the chassis. So I'm going to do that, and then we're going to work on this board here. Just in case anyone's curious, if you're following along at home, this guy, let's see, I believe it goes like this. To get this out, just had to undo these screws and lift, these guys up. And then here's our preamp tube board. I'm going to replace these capacitors, some of these resistors, this capacitor as well. These guys are pretty heat worn. Maybe this guy as well. I believe I got one of these 4K. We got something close enough, 3.9K. But yeah, we'll get to that in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and super glue these off camera. We'll set the chassis aside for that to dry. By the time we're done with the other board, we should be able to get this in place. Okay, so while that super glue's drying for hopefully holding those nuts in place to get the power tube board back in place without me going absolutely insane, we're going to rebuild this preamp tube board. We're going to replace these guys with some Vichet caps, 22 microfarad, 500 volt. And then we also have this guy, which is an old IC cap. I'm just going to go ahead and replace that while we're in here with this other guy. This is a 22 microfarad 50 volt. I have a 22 at 100 volt. And then all of these capacitors are 100K metal oxides. These are probably plate resistors for the preamp stages, which these are plate resistors can sometimes, as they're going out, cause a lot of crackle or background noise. Never a bad idea to change them out if you are chasing some noise and you have some extra 100K resistors, if that is what is in your amp. It's pretty typical for like Fender values as well. Looks like these guys, these are 10K dropping resistors between the nodes for the different power stages. Seems like these were changed out at some point. I measured every resistor on here to make sure there's no unexpected opens or anything, and these seemed okay, so I'm probably going to leave these in place. I also might leave this guy. This is a 4K resistor, which I only have 4.7Ks. And it seems fine for now. It would be pretty easy to replace this if it does go bad for some reason. So I'm probably going to just leave this in place, replace the caps and the 100Ks. The 100Ks look pretty toasty, so I'm going to replace those. And I have plenty of 100K metal oxides. Okay, here we go. Let's dive in. I'm going to desolder all the caps and do those first, and then we'll move forward with the rest of the resistors here and do those all in one go. So let's see, grab my pliers here. Everything is kind of a mess in my shop in anticipation of moving into the new space. So it's gonna be very nice. Have a nice clean workbench to show off once again. One thing I'm going to be conscious of is not lifting these traces like we saw on the power board. So even in this scenario, instead of just pulling on this guy and give it a little extra heat. Okay, there we go. Just in case there was some solder grabbing any of that. And it looks like the negative side is going to go here, positive at the top. And it looks like this part's already loose. Let's see if we can pull that through. And again, a little earthquake there. A little solder glob there. Okay. Yeah, negative to the top, positive was at the bottom. Let's go ahead and replace that guy before I forget. As always, we will try to get our part value facing up. Okay, that'll be good. I'm going to try to get a better lighting set up in the new shop as well. Need to do some research on that. What people use for ensuring there's no shadows. I believe they use like a 3-point light system. So we'll take some money from some repairs to throw into some lighting. Let's see. Okay, and these guys, again, negative going to the bottom. We probably have a ground. Yeah, so this is all like a ground plane here. And here. Okay. I probably will get set up also to show you all a multi-camera setup where I can have a camera on some benchtop meters, and the oscilloscope. Kind of debating whether to, I typically prefer to use a analog scope for this stuff. I have an old Tektronix 475 that was given to me, which I like using for this stuff, but I also have a picoscope, which might be better for the channel since I can then just directly show you guys screen grabs onto the computer through like OBS or something. So, you know, as with everything else, if y'all have opinions on that, happy to do either. Okay, I think for these guys, so I don't damage the trace, I am going to trash these caps, so I'm going to clip. Really don't want to lift another trace here. So look at that, that guy is already toast. Oh man, I barely put any heat on that too. That might have Now, these don't look stock. I think somebody changed these out when they did that other cap job. And they totally broke that solder trace that was hidden underneath the solder there. I'm going to route that leg for the new one down to this connection. All right, well, that's what I was trying to prevent doing myself. Looks like someone beat me to it. And these, so things like this are the reason that people, when people say that circuit board based amps are not as good, this is the stuff that can happen where I agree with them. When it is either a bad, you can have a bad design for either. So it's really more a matter of reliability. When you have, like on this amp, and this is why these were cheaper amps for a very long time, so the circuit board is not of the highest quality, which is a shame because they're otherwise great amps. So I'm gonna, after clipping this leg, I'm going to give it a little heat and push it through. There we go. So now I can grab it from the other side. Heat, grab. Nice and quick. Got to be quick with these ones. And the traces are cheap. But these and some of the newer Fender amps suffer from the same issue. Where really the traces, like on the Blues Deluxe reissues and all that kind of stuff, it really can be problematic. Okay, now I left these two in so I don't mess up which side is positive and negative. That's the only reason I'm doing that. If your memory is better than mine, no need to do that. And I'm going to throw a little bit of RTV on these guys. They're just big enough. This guy's not going to need it, but these ones are just big enough. We want to make sure they're not going anywhere. You don't want to do really sharp corners on these legs either, because again, they are kind of the weak point of this setup. Now I have thought about, this would be maybe a ridiculous thing to do for most people, but I would be lying if I said I hadn't thought about making a turret board style VTM amplifier. That would be pretty fun. But at that point, I think I'd rather just make a super lead or something. But maybe not. Maybe down the road. That would be a fun project. And just a little dollop. We'll see if I do end up finding somebody that really wants these other VTMs. I'll sell them off and build my own. I think maybe that's the better way to think about it. Okay, now because this guy, the trace is basically damaged, we could do two things. We could scrape back the enamel coating over the copper there and basically connect to the raw copper of that trace. Or because we are using a component that has a nice beefy leg, we can basically use that leg as a trace and solder it directly to this other component. And you just want to be careful you're not getting a cold joint when you do this, because there's some spring tension from that component leg. Is this an ideal situation? No. But it is. There's not enough power on these to cause like radio interference from that extra node from the trace sticking down or anything like that. That's just not an issue. We do have two parallel charge paths that are both positive, so there will be some amount of extra capacitance between that. That is negligible for our purposes. These are guitar amplifiers. If this was a precision device going into space, I would speak differently about this, but we are basically taking a circuit, excuse me, and figuring out how to abuse it in a way that sounds good. This is a distortion generator. Okay, same deal here. We're going to clip. I refuse to be a contributor to more lifted traces wherever I can. So again, I'm just holding the bottom. There's just enough solder holding these traces still on the board. So I'm letting gravity push that leg up. I'm holding it with my pliers, giving it a little heat. It comes popping up. I could then either use my pliers again, or it's luckily not hot enough that it's going to burn me. There we go. There we go. Okay, 2 more capacitors. Let's put them in. So I like to, with these capacitor legs, you can see that guy's all janky. Use pliers to straighten it out as much as possible. Be careful doing this. That junction between the leg and the capacitor body is the weak point of this component. And then give it a nice soft bend back down. And I just put the lid back on the RTV for some reason. And again, I use this stuff, Permatex. You just want to use a non-corrosive RTV, silicone RTV. Some of this stuff is corrosive to plastics. So just make sure you're not getting that. I don't know enough about it to know which ones, or specifically the name of the type, you should avoid. So if anyone does know that, please chime in. The trace also looks slightly lifted, but it could just be because they're part of the ground plane there. I think we'll be okay just soldering to that ground plane. But you want to make sure you get the silicone RTV that can handle high temperature. note, I just did what I told you not to do. I made a sharp bend there. Okay, nice soft bend. Alternatively, instead of putting the RTV in the bottom, these capacitors are close enough, I could have just put a bead from capacitor to capacitor there. That would have been just fine. So when you're soldering, you can add just a little bit to the tip of the soldering iron to help bridge the air gap between the component leg and your soldering iron, but then you otherwise want to use the component leg as the thing to heat the solder to ensure that you're getting a good solder joint and you're not just heating up a bunch of solder on your soldering iron, which is then connecting to a component that is not heated up enough to bond with that solder. There are a lot of really good tutorials out there for soldering, but I'm happy to go in depth on that as well if people have interest on this channel. I'm by no means a, I'm not certified by organizations. There are some people out there that are really great at the nuances. I am good enough. I will say it like that. The amplifier stages and probably the phase inverter. We're going to have 100Ks for each of those as plate resistors. Again, I'm going to desolder all of these and then put in new metal oxide 100K resistors. But let's see what we can do. And then at that point, we'll see how we're looking for the evening. I may just connect everything back up and see if we get power and any other faults and leave the control board as is. Just to see where we're at. Because I do have a band practice, I think, tomorrow. It'd be fun to play the amp at that. Even if it's not 100% stock yet. Oh, this will be fun. This one side is connected to that leg. What is going on here? I feel like I looked at this before and it was, do those traces not connect to each other because of that scratch? Interesting. Okay, well. You can take a closer look at that. Maybe I'll go ahead and start pulling these out. Let's see if we need to clip the legs on these too. we'll do 2 batches of 3. Sometimes when the leg is short enough like this, you can just heat it up and pop it out from the back like that. I've also started, one good note here is I've started not throwing component legs directly into the garbage out of paranoia that I'm going to burn my house down. I think I maybe even mentioned that on another video. So instead, just throw in the component legs to the side of the bench here. This guy might be loose. This guy, go ahead and pull that. And actually, now just out of curiosity, let's check continuity. So we should have continuity between here and here. And we do. So what's that wire doing? Like this one is a break. I get why that one's there. Might not need that. Well, that's interesting. It's also interesting that this trace goes all the way up along there. I wonder if that's some kind of acting as a shield. Well, whatever. Not the weirdest thing I have seen today or in this amp. Okay, halfway there. Just realized I stopped recording at some point to cough, but got these other plate resistors out. It was actually funny enough just saying that may have to end this video after getting the rest of this board put back together, just because I can tell my voice is getting a little strained. I'm still not all the way over this cold. And have a bunch more amp work to do this week, so we'll need to be able to talk to do that, so don't want to strain it too much. Let's get these other plate resistors in. And let's see. I think these guys are all going to fit nicely because these are all the bigger PCB positions. Nice. Okay. Resistors are non-polarized, so it doesn't matter which side you put them in, but when you do have them in a line like this, it's nice to get the color code the same direction. Of course, I'm saying that and now realizing this guy got backwards. Just for aesthetics. Will not sound any different. Will not behave any differently. But, man, the looks, the most important part of the amp, obviously. Okay. This trace is also totally toast. Let's see, we may want to just go ahead and bridge that to the other component on that point. This is something you see on the Blues Deluxe and Blues DeVille reissues. The components, some of the components in the relay switching, very well documented issue. Very common first thing for an amp tech to work on. They get so hot, they lift the traces on the other side of the board. The two 330 ohm 5 watt resistors along with the Zener diodes. Those components go bad. They're right up against the circuit board. They heat up to the point they desolder themselves. They also lift the traces on the back of the board. It causes an issue where it sounds like the amp is cutting out. Really what's going on is it's switching channels intermittently to the point where it sounds like volume is dropping or fluctuating because the two different volumes for the channels aren't the same. Typically, just, you know, unless by sheer coincidence. Okay. But I think that's what was happening there with some of the traces on these plate resistors. These guys were getting hot, desoldering themselves. Putting the higher wattage ones in there should help that a little bit. Okay, let's grab the chassis, get this board back in place. I don't think there's anything else in there that we need to do. I am going to check that connection one more time just because it's funny there's a wire there, but let's see. That's good. And then if I don't do a continuity check and go to the other side, do we have... Yeah, measure 100K. So, what the heck? Let's get this thing back together. And again, just for the sake of not losing my voice, I probably will leave, there's like 2 capacitors on the control board and that switch modification that I still need to, if I'm being 100% thorough for my approach on this, would change those capacitors, undo that switch. I just leave all that in place, see if this thing powers up, see if there's any problems, just so that I have enough of my voice left to do another repair tomorrow. But let's see where we get. All right, and my super glue trick only worked for half the nuts. I have to let that set a little bit longer. So we are going to call this video here. I'm going to come back to this tomorrow. I apologize, this is turning into a longer video series than it should be. But should be pretty quick to get the rest of this wrapped up, and really just need to change this wire. And if I am doing this in another video, I'll go ahead and pull this and do those other caps. And then we'll do a little sound test and VTM60 it. Unless there's any problems, then we'll diagnose those. So yeah, we'll see on the next one. Next video up will probably be the deluxe reverb. Got to get that out the door. And then twin reverb box AC4. I have a better fix for that than what I did before, where I just changed the tube. As always, thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking with me, and see you on the next one. Thanks again.